I don't know. There you go. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Cardinal Careers podcast. I'm here with the career development team, including me, Jessica Weicha, Heidi Nunez, Barbara Faust, Mac Watt, and Margaret Stacy Duffy. And today we have a special guest with us, Wendy Pochocki, the Associate Dean of Professional Graduate Studies at North Central College. And we're going to be talking all about grad school. So to start it off, why should we go to grad school? Why is it right for a certain student? If anyone would like to speak up on that.
Well, I'm happy to share with everyone. I think, grad school, first and foremost, is really a great investment in anyone's future, regardless of how old you are. I think there's a couple of things, obviously, that you need to think about to determine if it is the great investment for you. You have to think about your chosen career path, and there are certain careers that do require an advanced degree. But having an advanced degree just creates opportunities. I will say my own personal example is when I was working in higher ed, and I knew that if I wanted career advancement, that I needed to have an advanced degree. I knew that I wasn't guaranteed to get the next level of my job or an increase in salary, but I knew it was going to open doors for me. And at the bare minimum, being able to create those additional opportunities by pursuing an advanced degree and getting that advanced degree and having that additional skill set is certainly one of the great reasons, to get an advanced degree.
Absolutely.
And I'll add to that, Wendy. I know since you were talking about your own experience, I'll share from my experience, having gone through undergrad and had a little bit of work experience in there. I realized that there was a skill set that I really needed if I wanted to be able to manage a department or run program or manage people. And so I began to look for a program that would help me with these skills. How do I manage a budget? How do I grow a program? And so I started looking for programs. And for me, that was a combination of a master's in social work, because I was very interested at that time in working in a nonprofit setting, and an MBA program to be able to be on the administrative side. So for me, it was getting out into the working world a little bit and understanding what it is that I needed to, like you said, advance and move that forward.
Yeah. I would add to that too. I had a very similar to Heidi. I was out in the workforce, and I had my undergraduate degree. I studied environmental sustainability, which I'm still super passionate about, and was able to find some transferable skills. And I started working as a mental health professional and realized I really wanted to crack into higher ed. And I had no idea how to do that. I had no experience. And did a little bit of research and determined that to make that big career change, I wanted that education piece. So for me, it was about changing careers, and it really worked out well.
And in my case, I was in undergrad with sports communication, and around my junior year, I was like, I think I need a environment change, because I was interning with in the field of sports communication, and I just wasn't enjoying myself. And then I started looking into more higher education opportunities, and I began to fall in love with it. And now I'm in grad school for it. So I think it's a great opportunity.
Yeah, and I think that students that are still in undergrad, there's so many opportunities that they have, and I think internships to kind of explore. But even opportunities being a student worker on campus, offers an opportunity to kind of take a deeper dive in what those departments do and really kind of get a sense of, is this something that you can see yourself do? You could have an informal mentorship relationship with, whomever it is that your supervisor as a student worker. So I think there's a lot of unique opportunities that I think sometimes when students have a student worker position, it's really just, to have extra grocery money. But I think if they can rethink of what that experience could lead to. There's a lot of students that I talk to who are specifically interested in some of the graduate degree programs at North Central, reflect and refer back to their experience as a student worker, or their experiences they may have had in a club or an organization.
That's really interesting. I would have never thought of student workers that way, but it makes a lot of sense.
So it does, because, we really, believe that the student position can be transformative, because think about all the great skills that you're building as a student employee that's transferable to an internship or a full-time position. So it's good to hear that you never thought about that, Jessica, because I think a lot of students don't think about it that way. And when you're representing the college, which is what a lot of the student employee positions are, that's professionalism and work ethic, so great bullet points.
So if someone is an undergraduate student looking to go into grad school, mostly what our audience will be, when should they start looking for grad school? Should it be junior year, senior year? When should they be thinking about applying? Kind of when does that preparation process start?
I would say probably at least 12 to 18 months in advance. And that really gives the opportunity to do the research. A lot of that front work is doing the research of exploring what it is that you want to do, exploring the type of institution that you want to be at. In the last couple of years, the move to offering programs online has now become an option that when I was in grad school, it wasn't an option. I mean, it was at the beginning of when things were online. But students have to really kind of do their own self-inventory of what kind of experience do they want. Being in a program that's completely online is going to be very different than a program if you're physically going to campus. I will say thinking about online programs does open up the opportunity to go to different institutions across the country where you don't have to worry about relocating. So it certainly does offer that opportunity. I think another pro with considering an online program is you'll probably be in a classroom with individuals that you otherwise may never have engaged with. There's so many online programs where you're going to have peers that are from different parts of the world, different parts of the country that bring that perspective to that particular program. But in addition to that, it's also just the fundamentals and the requirements. What are the just basic steps that I have to go through to be considered for that program? What is a competitive applicant? So there's a lot of that front research that has to happen, where I would then say to actually launch that application cycle would probably be 12 months in advance. And I think the caveat I would say to that is some programs are going to be a little bit different. For students that may be looking at medical school, that timeline may change versus looking at an MBA program.
And Wendy, you talked previously about, your career goals, right? So I'd say, 12 to 18 months is great for the application process, but that discernment happens way before that. When you start thinking about what it is that you want for your future, and whether a master's program or a doctoral program is in the cards for you, because maybe you want to be a researcher and have an academic career. Well, you're going to probably begin exploring what it is that you want to research. Who do you want to do this work with? Where is this work going to take you? Much earlier on than that. So yeah. I think there's something to be said to think about the different types of graduate and professional programs that are out there. You talked about medical school, but you could also be considering law school. You could getting a JD, or again, a doctoral program, whether that's a PhD, a PsyD, an EdD. There's so many options out there, sure. Which is why early research is so important.
And I don't think that students should pressure themselves to have that decision and immediately transition to grad school right after undergrad. There's so many more students that are taking a gap year. But what's important about if you choose to do that is how you use that time, that break between undergrad and grad. You need to use that time to help answer those questions that you couldn't find an answer to. There's a reason why you didn't launch your grad application process. So you have to figure out what information do you need. What do I need to do to help me make that decision? So there's more students that are taking some time off in between to really make sure that the decision that they're making is a solid one. Graduate school will be more challenging than undergrad, but it's more than just a financial investment. It's your time, it's your energy, and you need to make sure that you're putting that in a place where when you feel like you're marching uphill, you can say with confidence, I've made the right choice. I'm in the right place. I'm in the right program. I know that there is a goal at the end and you're working toward achieving that.
I guess speaking of finances, because you mentioned, it's a lot of time and a lot of money. What's some tips you have when it comes to trying to afford grad school and trying to, it's another big chunk of change to pay after undergrad. How do you kind of go? Any tips about that process? Mac, you just went through that process. What's it been like?
Yes, still going through it. I mean, one of the big things, at least in my case, was looking for graduate assistantships, and I was blessed to find one and receive one. Because if I had not received one, I don't know if I would be in grad school. I probably would have found a job instead, just because of that financial case. But I think that's one of the biggest things. And another big thing is there's still scholarships out there for you to find as well. And I am always constantly looking for as many as I possibly can. But yeah, like I would say definitely if you're considering grad school, try to see if they offer any assistantships and try to find some like third-party scholarships as well, because they're definitely out there.
I would add as well as part of that research process, when students are trying to decide where it is that they want to attend, once you've decided what you want to do and then you're kind of choosing that school, part of that research process also involves having a conversation with folks in the admissions office or faculty of what are their alumni doing? Are their alumni successful with the degree that they've graduated from? What are they doing? What story do those alumni have to tell? And that needs to be part of that initial research process when you're having the conversations with those particular institutions, because yes, taking on additional debt is going to be a financial burden, and it will cause some stress. But if you have the confidence and you have the information where you're going to have employment opportunities, then that investment will have that return. So that's part of that research process as well. And I mean, there's lots of different places you can go. There's the Bureau of Labor Statistics can also provide some data. There are some professions where the growth is phenomenal in some areas. But again, I think that institutions have that information and they can help with answering those types of questions.
I think just to add too, I know that I've talked to some students about this, but thinking about what assistantships are and what they look like at different institutions can be really helpful. I know kind of depending on the graduate program, and I'm sure, Wendy, you can probably speak more on this and others in the call, but so for example, I had a lot of peers who went into science fields. My husband is one of them. He's an ecologist. And so when he went for his master's degree at those bigger institutions, often I'm thinking like those institutions who really rely heavily on research and or their TAs. I know at North Central we don't have TAs, but students who are listening in probably have peers at other institutions that are taught by TAs. And those are some that often complement the work that you're doing in your graduate program. And I know for Mac, I had a very similar experience we do where our graduate assistantships kind of were in student affairs that complemented the learning that we were doing in student affairs. So often those different assistantships, the three that I know of are just a general graduate assistantship, a teaching assistantship, and a research assistantship, can sometimes provide some stipend and or some tuition remission. And then they also can complement the learning that you're doing in the classroom. So you can get this really well-rounded learning experience while maybe mitigating some of that financial cost. But just kind of putting that out there, because I think that sometimes can be really, I know it was confusing for me when I was applying, navigating all that. And that is also an additional application process. So kind of figuring that out I remember it was confusing for me.
Yeah, I agree. I think that each institution is going to provide that type of information in its own way. And again, I kind of keep going back to the research process, but that's part of that question about how can I afford to pay for this? What opportunities does the institution have? Do they have graduate assistants or research assistants? So that individual at that institution can help you navigate of where you actually can find that information. And if it's even an option. I mean, not all institutions, and you had mentioned it, Margaret, North Central College does not offer teaching assistants or research assistants. So each institution is going to have a different host of offerings based on, what their goals are.
There's definitely a lot to research when it comes to what school you want to go to, what program it is that you want to be enrolled with. And again, that often begins with what is it that I want to do in terms of my career path and my career journey. And that's a whole, that's a whole area of, your, discernment. But I think that the more common questions that we get from students is about the application process itself. Right. So there's the big picture perspective, but we tend to get more questions about not just when do I get that started, but what does it look like, right? What do I have to do to prepare for this application? And so I was hoping that we can spend some time talking about that a little bit, because I know that there's a lot of questions out there about do I need to take a test? Do I need to do an interview? Letters of recommendation, all that kind of stuff. And every school may have very different requirements, and every program is going to have different requirements. So I don't know where we want to start there, but just what should students expect in terms of the application process, how to best prepare? I don't know. Anyone want to share from your own experience or from insider tips?
I would say the first thing that anybody that's navigating through the process, regardless of what program it is setting aside dedicated time to focus on the process. Some processes are longer and have more requirements than others, but it's really finding the time to have a dedicated time to actually go through the process rather than rushing through it. Some programs are highly competitive and others are a little bit less competitive. So your application is putting your best foot forward, where a group of individuals are going to read the information that you've presented in your application and make a decision. So it's really essential that you find dedicated time to be intentional about that process. I think safe assumptions to make that letters of recommendation are going to be part of that process. So even before you start the application process, thinking about who do you want to speak on your behalf? Who is it that you want to be part of your story that you're telling as you're going through the application process? Academic credentials is always going to be part of that process. So it's kind of taking an evaluation of what are your academic credentials, and as part of your research to see where you fit with those academic credentials. Not everybody meets the academic credentials. And you have to kind of take a step back and think about how do I navigate through this process? So I think there's some safe assumptions to make across the board. But then, yes, like you had said, Heidi, I think depending on, there's different programs that, applying to health professions programs or law schools, assume you're going to have a standardized test that you're going to have to prepare for, you're going to have to take. The application process will probably have an interview. That's going to be a required piece of that. So practicing your interview skills is going to be something that's going to be part of that application process as well. I think connecting with your faculty are a great resource, in addition to the Career Development Office, but connecting with faculty. They for the most part, have gone through that process, so they can at least offer some tips of what that process is going to look like as well.
I tend to tell students that's your first conversation. When you've decided that you want to go on to get an advanced degree, the first conversation will typically be with your faculty, not just because of the letter of recommendation that you want to secure, but exactly for the reason that you said, Wendy. They've been through this process. They may know the different schools and the different programs, and they'll be able to guide you in that process.
Yeah. And I think it's exciting. I think, taking a deep breath as you start that process, this is an exciting next step in your journey. So it's it may feel daunting and overwhelming, but it is exciting. It's an exciting process to navigate through. And there's a lot of people that can help support, family, friends, but also people at that institution, at your institution, at North Central. There's so many people at North Central that are more than happy to help support students through this next step in their journey.
Yeah. I would also add that professional associations are really great places to learn about information. So if you're interested in going to occupational therapy, looking at AOTA, there's a student section there that talks about how to know whether or not you're a competitive, applicant, how to gain observation experience. Also, same thing for students applying to medical school or physical therapy. So a lot of the health professions, and even with the American Psychological Association, there's wonderful sections, resources for students there that answer a lot of questions about graduate schools. They also have links so you can actually search for some of the graduate programs. It makes it a little bit less daunting because you can just sort of think, where am I going to apply? Some students can really sort of see that there's hundreds of schools around the country. So I've always directed students to those associations, and then the other thing too is once they make that decision, I'm really glad that Wendy talked about admissions counselors. Admissions counselors are some of the most helpful people that a student really wants to connect with, because admissions counselors, their role is to sort of help you, sort of guide you through the process. So they can really walk you through the requirements. They can even take a look at your transcript to tell you if you're a competitive applicant. But their goal is really to help you. And I think a lot of students don't realize that admissions counselors for some programs are even on the admissions committee. So they really have a lot of knowledge. And I've always found that they're incredibly helpful. So I would encourage students to really don't hesitate to reach out and ask questions.
Absolutely. And just kind of a quick shout out, North Central has a pre-health advisor. Margaret Degenhardt is here to help students who are navigating.
She's awesome.
She is. Help navigate students, if they're considering health professions. And I think what's important is it's very easy to say what you don't want to do, but there's so many different directions that individuals can go with careers that you don't know everything that you could possibly want to do. So I think having a conversation with somebody who has all of that knowledge to say, based on the conversation we're having, you may want to think about this as a career. You may have never thought about it before because you didn't know it existed. We say all the time, you don't know what you don't know. So the more conversations you can have with different individuals, the more knowledge you're gonna get.
Barb, you talked about the admissions counselor, and I have to say, oftentimes when I meet with students and they're asking me questions about the grad school process, I refer them directly to the admissions website and the counselors that they're of the school that they're looking to get into. And I just want to confirm this one thing, because this is I give this advice, and I'm acknowledging at this point that it may be dated. So now that we've got Wendy here, you can confirm for me if this is still good advice, if this is still the process. So in prior roles, I used to I definitely used to get involved with the admissions process, from the being at recruitment events, or being an admissions application reader, or doing the interviews and things like that. And so from the contact perspective, I often recall being at recruitment events and meeting folks and remembering their names when I see their application. And just when you make that initial impression, much like when you are networking for a job or for an internship, making that connection with admission staff or folks that are involved in that process and making a good impression there. I remember that very distinctly, just being a favorable, part, something you'd want to do. So Wendy, is that still good advice? Would you still recommend that a student reach out to admissions, make that connection, attend events, even if it's online, to be able to help stand out in that application process?
Absolutely. And I would take it even a next step further, that when they're submitting their personal statement, to remind the folks, because it might, like you had said, there might be more than one individual reading that application. So in the personal statement, to say, I enjoyed when I met or when I attended, to kind of put that call out there as well. Because again, there could be multiple individuals reviewing those applications, and I might not be one of them for that particular day. So it's important to, again, have that there as well.
Okay, good. I feel validated now, Wendy. Thank you.
What would be some other things you guys would recommend for undergraduate students to do to stand out kind of in the application process? Like, should they be looking to do certain activities to put on their applications? Kind of what helps them stand out a little more?
I would say many, and we're but many institutions are using the terms a holistic admission process and want a diverse population of students in their program. And diversity is, we're also looking at what have you done in the past? So we're looking at, if you did take a gap year, what did you do in that gap year? So what kind of professional experiences have you had? So I would say, especially if you're looking for a particular area, you want to kind of tailor your resume with experiences that are relatable to that, so that you not only can put that on your resume to try to stand out, but if you're in an interview, you can draw from those experiences to be able to answer questions at a deeper level, explaining why you're interested in that profession because I've had these particular experiences. Mm-hmm. You want more recent experiences. I would say one thing that you don't want to be on your resume is a very stale experience from high school or that's several years old. So you certainly want an experience that's going to be a little bit more relevant. If you're applying for a doctoral program that is research-based, you're going to start wanting to think about what are the research, what type of research have you done? How can you really kind of have to kind of carve out what makes you competitive and tie it to the program that you're looking for.
Yeah, I think to add on to that, and I realize I think I'm repeating some, but I was thinking about it in my head as being intentional about the experiences you have. Thinking about my own experience, I know my experiences that I had before grad school didn't necessarily relate very well. I know that, but I was intentional about them because at the time I thought it was what I wanted to do. And it helped me then be able to communicate that, well, this isn't what I wanted to do in my previous experiences do not line up perfectly. Here's how they do line up, and here's how they helped me realize that this is the path I want to take. So I think that intentionality is important. And then to echo and maybe tie in what you all kind of mentioned previously is that networking piece, talking to people, because your faculty will have really great recommendations. And, if you were to reach out to the admissions department and say, do you know of any alums from this program that I could connect with and just learn about their experience? They might have some really specific ideas for you to go get engaged with. If you want to work at a zoo someday, try and talk to someone who's been through a grad program that would match that, and talk and go work at the zoo or volunteer, whatever that might be. So just being intentional about those experiences and network.
Yeah, and and I recognize that in the era of the COVID-19 pandemic, there's so many challenges that exist with trying to get experiences. So I think it's also kind of thinking creatively about how you can start consuming those types of experiences. There's a lot of things that can be done virtually, shadowing, even interviewing somebody who's in that field. So I think, thinking creatively and a little bit outside of the box, especially right now, will also add that skill set. That's an additional skill set that you'd be able to talk about is, being a critical thinker and being creative with, how you're navigating through the process. So again, I recognize that. I talk to students all the time about the challenges that they're having, that they're facing because of limitations that the pandemic is putting on experiences that they would like to have. I will say, I can speak for North Central, that we are sympathetic to the challenges that applicants are facing. And a lot of students, we give them the opportunity to talk about, what weren't you able to do? What were you planning to do that you weren't able to accomplish because of the pandemic? So we're looking at what their plans were, but they weren't able to accomplish them. So, we want to take that into consideration as well.
And at least from my experience, I was kind of early to it. So I knew that I was going to be shifting gears back beginning of my junior year. And the biggest advice I can give was, if I could give it to myself 2 years ago, it would be to get out of my comfort zone and actually go towards things that would actually help me with where I'd want to go. Get out of the comfort zone of what I do know and go towards what I'd like to know. What I would like to be doing, 5 years from now, 10 years from now, like set that foundation of what you'd be like to be doing, because the foundation isn't going to be, what you will be doing, but it puts you on the right track. It puts you on that road towards what you'd like to be doing. And like, for example, for me is never in a million years would I think that I would join a fraternity and then like be the scholarship and academic chair, but I went for it because I thought that would be the right trajectory for what I'd be like to be doing. And then I ended up getting it and I loved it. And that was my confirmation of, all right, I like what I'm doing. This is the right trajectory that I'd want to go. So I think the biggest advice I can give is just get out of that comfort zone and try to figure out what you want to do and go for it. Just don't hesitate or procrastinate. Just go for it.
Good advice.
I think the one piece of advice that I have for students is a little bit different. I've read a lot of graduate school and professional essays, and one of the most important things is that the students answer the prompt, because if they are asking something very specific, then there's a reason why, and they want to know the answer. So that's one of the things that students can really set themselves apart, is thoroughly understanding the writing prompt and making sure that they're thoroughly answering it, and then actually having somebody read it, like the writing center, so that they're looking at it for grammar, but always asking, am I answering the writing prompt? And I think that can be something that they're overlooking, because they're thinking about from the perspective of, what does the school want to see? How do I meet the best candidate? And they're sort of missing actually sort of the themes in many of these essays. So I can see some of you shaking your heads. So,
The other thing I would say to that, Barbara, is when it comes to letters of recommendation,
mm-hmm.
whoever the student's asking to write the letter of recommendation, feel comfortable saying, can you write me a positive letter of recommendation?
Right.
In my time in higher ed, I have read letters of recommendation that were not glowing recommendations. And the fact that that individual did not tell the student, I'm sorry, I can't write you a positive letter of recommendation. So a student would assume that the letter is going to be positive. So, and I would say specifically for myself, I know what your academic credentials are. I don't need the information that's already in your application. Letters of recommendation are designed to give information that's talking more about character traits, the preparedness and the readiness for that particular individual to be in this program. So again, to kind of take control of that application process and be in the driver's seat and be a little bit more direct and say, I'm going to ask you to write me a letter of recommendation. Can you write me a glowing recommendation that says that you more than highly recommend me? That's what I want to read. I want to read a letter of recommendation that's telling a story that the student hasn't told. This is somebody else supporting that candidate and telling a different side.
Those are great. Those are both really great points, because I think it really speaks to really reading carefully that application, mm-hmm. understanding what they're looking for, not just in the writing prompts and the essay, but even in the letters of recommendation. I often get questions from students about, who do I ask for a letter of recommendation? Can I just ask, can I ask my advisor? Can I ask my 101 faculty member? And so you said something, Wendy, that it was specifically about getting to understand your character traits and in my mind, can you be successful in this kind of program? So you definitely want to ask somebody who has good experience with you in the classroom, who has seen your work ethic, who can speak not only positively about you, but positively about you in that particular experience. And bonus, if that person has experience in that field, right? So if you're going into a psychology program, it'd be fantastic that you get a letter of recommendation from your psychology professor and not your, 101, card 101 professor or something like that.
Exactly. I mean, that recommender what's fantastic about some of the letters that I read is that somebody would say, I could see this person as my colleague. They have the character traits that I would want to work alongside this person. Obviously they need a skill set, but this is somebody that I could see would blossom and grow to be somebody that I would want to work with. And that speaks volumes about somebody else supporting those character traits.
In terms of asking for letters of recommendations as well, everyone learn from my mistakes. Communicate with those people. Communicate with them. Let them know what you need. Let them know, and don't email them once a week being like, hey, I found one more school. I'll need one more letter. Be very professional. Be clear with what you're asking them as well. Please learn from my mistakes.
As well as remind them of deadline dates.
Well, I always tell students that when you're applying to graduate school, you should be giving your letter writers a packet of information, like your resume, a draft, a really good draft, of your personal statement, the schools that you're applying to and why you're applying to them, and really those deadlines so that they have a sense, and give them several months to write those letters. You can't ask sort of at the last minute, for the letters. Wendy, I have one question for you. And, this is something that students will often ask me, and I know that we touched on it a little bit, and it's really the timing of when you apply to graduate school. And a big question that students will ask, because I don't think that they believe the answer, is that if I choose to take a gap year, which I call a year of opportunity, is that will a graduate school look at that negatively? So many students think they have to automatically go into graduate professional school. And the question I have for you is, what is your advice about the timing? Because I'll let you know where it's coming from. I tell students to apply when you're the strongest candidate. Don't feel like you have to rush. And I know you talked about this a little bit, but I wanted to know if you could talk a little bit more about this and sort of reassure students that they don't have to rush, that they don't have to hurry up and apply if they don't feel ready.
Agreed. I mean, graduate school is about timing, not just the application process timing, but it's about the timing in your life. You have to make sure that you are prepared and you are ready to actually take this on. This is a life-changing event for individuals, and it is finding a balance of everything else that you have going on in your life. And even if you do it right after undergrad, it's still a transition. So you have to make sure, students have to make sure that they're ready for that transition. So I would say, back to the question about taking the year of opportunity, it's what you've done with that time. And there's a variety of reasons. A very basic reason is I need to save money. I need to pay for this and I need to save money. And so be upfront with it. I took a year off of school because I need to save money to pay for graduate school. That is a very valid and honorable reason why individuals have taken that time off, for an opportunity to ease the burden of the financial responsibility that they're going to have. And I think it really just comes down to being very concise about what you've done with your time. This is what I'm applying for. This is why I'm applying for it. And this is why you should take me. This is why I would be a fantastic student in your program and future alum. And here's what I would be able to do. But the one thing that we haven't talked about is it's a two-way process. So it's not just the student selling themselves to the institution. It is the institution's responsibility to sell them to the student. In all of the interviews that I host for our programs, I tell students it's a two-way street. You're interviewing us as well. I need to make sure that I am putting my best foot forward when I'm having conversations with students that are interviewing for many of our programs. Students have many choices for different degree programs across the country or the globe. So why is this particular institution a best fit for you? And so again, that kind of goes back to the student. Be in the driver's seat through the entire application process and through that navigation of, is this program the best fit for me? And if it's not, that's okay. You have other options to choose. You want to make sure that you're in the best place so that when you, again, are feeling like you're climbing uphill, that you don't have that anxiety of second guessing where you're at and why you're doing what you're doing. So again, it's very important that students understand it is a two-way street.
Mm-hmm.
And that goes back to the initial point of doing the research. Right. So I think it's incredibly important for students to understand not just where a school is located, how much it costs, but also and what programs they offer, but what kind of research is coming out of the school. As you mentioned, what are their alums doing after the program? It may be even researching their faculty, right? What are they interested in? What programs are they driving as well? On the flip side, I always thought it was super interesting to meet with a candidate who knew so much about the program that I was representing. If they can talk to me about the faculty that they wanted to work with, a class that they wanted to take, a particular practicum that they were really hoping that they would be able to get involved with, or even if they can tell me how they felt connected to the mission or called to the mission and they wanted to be a part of that, that was always super impressive to me. And that helped me feel like if we were to offer admissions to this person, they would accept it. And not only would they accept it, but they would be an engaged student on our campus and contribute to the climate. And they would be an amazing alum because they're already invested in that.
Yeah.
And so with that, I also wanted to mention it was also very impressive to me if the candidate could tell me either in an interview or in their statement what it is that they wanted to do with their degree, right? What if once you get this degree, where do you hope to be working? Who do you want to be working with? So as much of that discernment as it can happen in advance, I think could make for a stronger candidate.
Yeah, and I think all of that kind of goes back to practicing. So having, as we've all mentioned, having somebody read your personal statement, practicing your interview skills so that when you get to that point, you have that level of confidence and that you can answer those questions and have that proactive type of conversation with that individual. And it's okay if at the end of that process you walk away and say, you know what, this isn't what I thought it was. This is not the best fit for me. That's okay. Yeah. It's okay to walk away from a school that you thought, I mean, and how many of us have gone through that with undergrad? You know, you have your heart set on something and you experience it and you're like, this is not what I thought this was going to be. There are some similarities with the graduate school search process that are somewhat similar to undergrad. I think if you're looking for an on-ground program, go to that campus, physically go to that campus. If that's where you're going to have to be in classes, then you should go visit that campus. Mm-hmm. That gut feeling that we all got with undergrad, that is a similar process with undergrad. But again, I think it's you need to be okay that what you thought was going to be your best place to be may not be. Your choice 3 may turn out to be number 1. And I think you have to be open and have that flexibility.
I don't know how we're doing on time, Mac and Jessica, but I do want to put in a quick plug that there are several steps in the grad school application process that we can help prepare with preparing, right? So if your application requires a resume or an interview, we can definitely help with those processes. And we talked about connecting with your faculty. It's okay to have your faculty member or your recommender take a look at your application as well and read that for you. There's a lot of support. This does not have to be a solo project.
Absolutely.
And just a plug that North Central has several fantastic graduate programs that are in the health professions or business or leadership and writing. And that I'm more than happy to have a conversation with any of our students about the programs that North Central offers as well.
And Wendy, we've got some new programs that have come online in the past couple of years. Can you talk about that really quick?
Sure. So we offer a suite of 3 graduate business degrees. We have an MBA, we have a Master of Financial Management, and then a Master of Human Resource Management. We have a suite of leadership degrees that includes higher education, sports leadership, as well as organizational leadership. We have a Master of Arts in Professional and Creative Writing, a Master of Arts in Liberal Studies. We have 2 education degree programs. Those are for teachers who are in the classroom, so that would be a different population. And then we do have 3 graduate health professions programs. We have the graduate program in athletic training, occupational therapy, and then our newest edition that we are actually interviewing this currently for our first cohort for our Master of Science in Physician Assistant Studies. And I think that some of our students that are listening may not be on campus as often, but we are under construction with a brand new health sciences building that will also have the engineering lab. It is scheduled to open in the spring semester, so it's very exciting. The place that graduate programs are at North Central.
Very nice. It is impressive to see how quickly that building is going up, and it looks amazing.
It does, yes. It is an amazing space.
So I think we've come up on time. Thank you guys all so much for the useful information. I know as a student who doesn't know much about grad school, it was really nice to hear all your insights. And thank you, Wendy, for being our first guest on our podcast.
Thank you for having me. It was a lovely way to end my week.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, for listening, and we hope you tune into our next podcast.
Awesome.